Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So I don't know exactly what happened. I remember last week thinking there's nothing too crazy happening with the market, not a lot of stuff to talk about. And all of a sudden I'm looking at things today and there's a ton of different cards to cover. Part of this is meta related, people still reacting to the ban list and a couple of events, with people also trying things out in the OCG as well. But we did just have the Dark World structure deck come out here in the TCG, and despite how the deck didn't do well over in the OCG, there are a lot of people here trying it out and doing some really cool things with it. We don't have any other new products coming out in the TCG until 2023, so let's enjoy the buyouts and price spikes while they're still happening. Let's get started. Alright, so we're starting off with something very fitting. It is Grapha, Dragon Lord of the Dark World. Dark Worlds will basically always have a very special place in my heart. They're the first deck that I ever played because when I was starting to play, I was on a budget and Dark Worlds were really cheap and easy to build. So it's really cool for me now to see Dark Worlds with like a fusion monster and a dedicated field spell searcher. I would have loved to have access to these new Dark World cards back then. That would have been crazy. Now, despite these changes, Grapha is still an important card for the Dark World deck. If it's discarded, it pops an opponent's card, and while this card is in your graveyard, you can bounce a Dark World monster from your side of the field back to your hand in order to special summon this card out of the graveyard. Really great card, but because it came out in a structure deck and it was never really something that was like splashed into other decks, it has kept relatively cheap. However, there is one hard to find printing of Grapha, and that is the Duelist League colored rares. Those rares are going to cost you about $25 each right now, depending on the color, which is crazy when you remember that they aren't even hollow. In my opinion, Duelist League printings are the most overrated printings in the game. They always spike and get really expensive when a card with like a Duelist League printing starts to see meta play just because of how hard they are to find. I personally don't think they look that great or special or amazing, anything like that. The golds aren't really anything to write home about either, but I think that the ultras are really simple, they're really clean, and they are only $1 or $2 each. So if you're looking to bling out your Dark World deck just a little bit, this is the way that I would upgrade your Grapha. Up next, while we're talking about Dark Worlds, we have to talk about Coach King Giant Trainer. So this is a really awesome card. I think we saw this card a couple of years ago in one of the Beast Warrior decks as they made this card using Coach King Bearman. Giant Trainer is a generic rank 8 monster that requires 3 materials to make. It has an ability that you can use 3 times per turn. You can detach a material from this card to draw a card and reveal it. And then if that card is a monster, you burn your opponent for 800 damage. Obviously, this is kind of insane, especially in Dark Worlds, where you play a lot of monsters and can flood the field with level 8 monsters. It can even win you the game in time with the burn damage, which is cool as well. The one downside to this card is that you lose your battle phase, but if you do manage to resolve this card completely, you should probably be winning the game. Just don't be like my one buddy Cam and use Ash Blossom on the first detach. Yeah, that actually happened at Tom's house this weekend. Anyways, guys, Giant Trainer is a card with only a couple of different printings. It had a secret rare printing back in Number Hunters, an old side set, and those are going to cost you around $20 to $25 a piece. It also has a common printing from an OTS tournament pack. Those used to be cheap, right? They were only $1 or so before, but I guess it has been a while since that printing came out. Those are going to cost you about $8 to $10 a piece right now as well. So this is definitely a card that you should be digging up out of your bulk if you have some. One thing to note though is that this card also actually has a super rare printing that only came out in German from one of their advent calendars a few years ago. Those printings don't have their own listing on TCG Player, but they are available on Card Market, eBay, and some other platforms. Those supers should only be about $5 or so, so maybe check out eBay or something to see if you can snag a cheaper copy, as long as you're okay with keeping a translation with you or using the Neuron app if you're playing at a bigger event. One last Dark World related card that we have here, it is Akashic Magician. This is a generic Link 2 monster that requires its 2 materials to have the same type, something very easy to do in Dark Worlds where most of the monsters are fiends. Now on Link Summon, this card lets you bounce any monster that it points to back to its owner's hand. It does have another effect that isn't really that relevant. Akashic Magician is really cool in Dark Worlds because you can actually use its 2 arrows pointing up and down to bounce 2 monsters back to your own hand. You can summon Ceruli to your opponent's board directly in front of the extra monster zone and then bounce it back to your hand so that you can discard it again, and you can also return your own danger monster to your hand to use its effect and hopefully draw another card. It's pretty cool, maybe a bit more situationally useful, and might not be too useful if you draw too many danger monsters, but still something that's really cool to have available as a tech option. Anyways, this card has two different printings. The original secret rares are from Circuit Break. Those are around $12 for the unlimiteds and $14 for the first edition. And then for the budget version, the card got a super rare reprint from Shadows in Valhalla that is still only about 50 cents. This card isn't super necessary and could probably be easily replaced by something else in the extra deck, but it's still neat. If you guys have a few extra copies of this card sitting around, maybe consider bringing it to your locals to offload to those who just picked up their Dark World structure decks and want to try building the strategy. Alright, this is a card that I haven't thought about in like years. It's Forbidden Lance. I don't know when this card was last used exactly. I think it might actually just be Dino Rabbit format. Really simple card, you can target a monster, it loses 800 attack points, but it's unaffected by other spell and trap cards, so obviously the game was a lot slower back then, right? You could use Lance to protect your monsters from Mirror Force, Dimensional Prison, Torrential Tribute. You could also use it to make your opponent's monster smaller so that you could run it over in battle, which is something that I think not very many players think about that much in today's game given how fast it is. After not seeing play for at least 7 or 8 years, the card is actually now being looked at again in the OCG as a side deck tech card. Right now, Kashtira is a pretty decent deck over there, and that's largely thanks to Kashtira Shangri-Ira, the rank 7 monster that clogs your opponent's monster zones while it's face up on the field. People were teching in Swords of Concealing Light and Book of Eclipse to get rid of Shangri-Ira, and so now people are using Forbidden Lance as a flexible side deck card that can protect your Shangri-Ira and keep your opponent's zones locked. Shangri-Ira's attack point drop from Forbidden Lance doesn't matter if your opponent can't get monsters onto the field in the first place. This is a pretty cool tech. I really like it, though obviously with the differences between the TCG and OCG, we don't know if this tech is going to be a thing over here as well. Now, the super rares from Storm of Ragnarok are the original highest rarity printing, and they are fairly expensive. The super rare unlimited versions are around $6 to $8 right now. The first eds are theoretically higher. The cheapest one on TCG Player is like $25, but there haven't been very many that have sold for more than about 10, so the first eds are probably around somewhere between like $10 to $15. If you want, there is also the platinum rare as an alternative holo version, that's about $3 to $4, or if you don't care about the rarity, thankfully there are a ton of printings of this card from various decks and side sets that you can get for under $1 each. The next one here is another cool, pretty old card. It's Cerebus the Ancient and Ascended. Cerebus is another card that is seeing some side deck play in the OCG because just like Forbidden Lance, this is a card that can protect your own monsters and ensure that your effects either resolve or stay active. Cerebus is a ritual monster that I've never seen anyone actually ritual summon. Rather, it functions as kind of like a hand trap. You discard this card when your opponent uses a card effect and targets one of your monsters, and you negate that opponent's card's effect. This is another one that is being used over in the OCG very similarly to Forbidden Lance, but they're using it to protect from cards like Tearlament Suliak, Mind Control, Infinite Impermanence, and Ghost Mourner. Cerebus is a card that people have tried to hype up a few times in the past, but it's never really managed to stick around and make an impact on the meta. However, this time might be a little bit different because of the Bestial cards. Cerebus happens to be a dragon, which means that it can be searched with the effect of Bestial Magnamut during the end phase. Because of this little bit of hype, both versions of Cerebus have started to move upwards. The original secret rares from Invasion Vengeance used to be only a few dollars, but they're now up to anywhere from $10 to $15 depending on if you're looking at the unlimited or first edition version. And even the ultra rare reprints from Dual Overload, those used to be like a quarter or something like that. Those are now up to $2 to $3 a piece. Personally, I'm not really sold on this card. This card has disappointed me in the past and it just feels way too situational to actually be useful, so I would be offloading any copies that I have, but maybe things will be different this time around, I don't know. Even if I needed to pick some up though, I'd only be looking to pick up the Ultras for now while they're seeing this initial wave of hype because of the card's usage over in the OCG. So this one is just silly. I think we have talked about it before, but I wanted to make note of it again because of its recent price spike. We have Cybeast. I think that we did talk about this card a couple of months ago, back when it spiked up to $7 or $8 around there. And to be honest, I thought back then that this card was already way overpriced. It's used as a tech card in current Kashtira builds, being a normal summon that you can have banish a psychic monster from your deck, which speeds up the Kashtira portion, but also turns this card into a level 7 monster that you can then overlay with. However, it's literally only going to be useful for another couple of months. Once Kashtira gets the next wave of support in Photon Hypernova, Cybeast basically won't be seeing any play at all. This is why it's surprising to me that Cybeast saw yet another price jump to where it's now sitting at $20 per copy on TCG Player. This card does only have the one rare printing from back in Extreme Victory, but this is still crazy, especially when you remember that the card isn't going to be seeing any play whatsoever in just a couple of months. Even if Kashtira were like a top tier deck or a really good strategy right now, I would be expecting this card to be reprinted in an OTS tournament pack, which would instantly bring this card's value back down anyways. If you guys do still have this card in your book somewhere for whatever reason, definitely go ahead and try to offload it now before the card becomes $1 once again in just a couple of short months. Alright, one last card I want to cover here, it's Imperial Iron Wall. This is a really simple floodgate, though I guess it feels more like an anti-floodgate sometimes. It simply says that cards cannot be banished. This card has a couple of different applications. On one hand, it can be sided against Fluwanderies. With this card up, when they tribute the small birds, they would go to the graveyard, which means that the deck doesn't have access to as much recursion. Keep in mind though that this can be easily outed with Unexplored Winds. The more popular application of this right now, I think at least in theory, is as a counter side to Dimensional Fissure, Macrocosmos, and Dimensional Shifter. Those three cards make it basically impossible for some decks to function. Decks like Tearlament and Dark World, Imperial Iron Wall basically helps to ensure that you're still able to play the game. It's not a perfect card by any means, but it's one of those things that I think players are looking at out of desperation, since if you're playing something like a Shizu Tearlament, those cards can make it impossible to play the game at all. I don't know how much play this card is going to see, if any, but if you're really struggling to deal with those floodgates, or maybe you want to pick some up in preparation for the Kashtira strategy, then maybe this is a counter card that you want to try to side in. Anyways, Imperial Iron Wall has a couple of different holo printings. The ultra rare from Legendary Collection Joey's World is around $5 to $6, and then we also have the OTS Tournament Pack super rare printing, which is a few dollars as well. Aside from that, the card is quite cheap. It just received a rare printing in Tactical Masters, so the card should be very easy to get access to. It just might be worth noting though that the holo versions do have some attention on them given the most recent ban list, and people might be desperate to look for ways to deal with the freshly unlimited floodgates. Alright guys, that is all we have for today. We are about to hit a bit of a slower time for Yu-Gi-Oh! Without product releases or too many big events around the holidays. Things can get a little bit slow, but that's okay because Tom and I are going to bring you some discussions and other awesome content that you guys are here for. And maybe you guys can also check out MSTmerch.com if you're looking for some awesome sleeves or something like that as gifts or stocking stuffers for your card game playing friends. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch episode, please make sure that you let me know by slamming that thumbs up button for me. Also make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you guys think about the cards we talked about today, and also what other cards are trending on the market so I can cover them in future episodes. Also, if you haven't already, I don't know why, make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button to get all of the latest and greatest content from both Tombox and myself. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.